skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Discrimination is unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. The idea that lighter skin is more acceptable and beautiful has been implanted into racial groups. This stems from the class system, slavery, and colonization. In the United States, colorism was first implemented because of slavery. Slave owners would assign slaves with lighter skin more domestic tasks, while giving those with darker skin tasks that involved working outside. Enslavers were partial to light-skinned enslaved people because they were often family members. Enslavers frequently forced enslaved women into sex, and the light-skinned children of enslaved people were the telltale signs of these sexual assaults. Colonization also plays a big role in why colorism is so present in the world. After India became a British colony, things started taking a turn for the worse. The image of a black-colored Indian was projected as inferior by British public officials, and that unfortunately stuck all the way to modern times. This is all because of the influence of Europeans in the country and bundling those with darker skin to a lower class. While peasants became tanned as they labored outdoors, the privileged had lighter complexions because they did not. Thus, dark skin became associated with lower classes and the light skin with the elite. MS Magazine studies show that dark-skinned Brazilians make up 63% of the poorest sectors of Brazil. That is far more than half. Someone's own family and close friends can be the biggest colorist. Shaming darker-skinned individuals within a family and praising those who are lighter genetically is a common practice. No one decides what their skin tone is when they are born, so why do they have to face the repercussions? This is an especially big issue in mixed families where the children have endless chances of being the same shade as the lighter parent to being the same shade as the darker parent, etc. Rejection from family can be the worst kind of pain, especially when it's based on something you can't control, such as skin shade. As much as family and friends should be there for each other, those who you trusted the most can be the first to make you insecure and feel less worthy. A law professor at Vanderbilt University conducted a study of over 2,000 immigrants from around the world and found that those with the lightest skin earned on average 18 to 15% more than similarly qualified immigrants of darker hues. Just based on the tone of one shade, someone can face a plethora of brick walls that hold back the potential they may have. About 2/3 of Hispanics with darker skin color, 64%, report they have experienced discrimination or been treated unfairly regularly or from time to time, compared with half of those with a lighter skin tone. People in South Asian countries put out dating advertisements so they can find someone to marry. It is like dating apps with descriptions and everything, but there's one outstanding factor. The men and women will make it clear that they want a fair person to marry. They will also mention that they themselves are fair, because that characteristic has become something so desirable in many countries. Younger people of color also face colorism at school. A teen from Atlanta recounted stories from school, one being where kids will line up from lightest to darkest and make him stand all the way at the end. When he would say he didn't want to, they told him he had to because he was the darkest among everyone. This wasn't just a fun game, it was purposeful teasing to make the teen feel excluded. The video we are about to watch shows the raw emotions of darker skinned girls who have faced colorism. It truly shows the impact of colorism on human lives. The girls also share ways they overcame the feelings of helplessness.
When you think about studies that show that women of lighter skin tones get complimented more in general in a range of things than women of, or young girls of darker skin tones. So if you're talking about even just in the school setting, you have two young girls who both do a great job. They both get A's on something, let's say, and the young woman who is of a lighter skin tone gets complimented and commended more. That's where your self-esteem comes from. That's what you start to believe. And how often are you reinforcing things and that you may not even realize you're reinforcing?
I remember I would say 9th grade, I thought, like, what if I just wasn't here? It'd just be easier. But, like, the only thing that got me through that was, like, my mom telling me and my friends, especially Kamaya, just, like, being there. And having someone to talk to, it just made me think, like, I can't leave them. Because it keeps me, like, coming to school every day and, like, just, like, the smile on my face sometimes.
It's painful.
It is. Because this should happen to anyone. We shouldn't have to hate ourselves because of the color of our skin. And the fact that I had to talk one of my best friends out of not wanting to be like that because of the color of our skin, about the fact that we're just so bad. It's not right. You have to love yourself and love the others around you and know that you're gonna be okay. And you have to stay strong.
Even though colorism still prevails, there are few non-discrimination laws in place to help with the backlash one may receive solely based on their skin shade. If an employer discriminates against someone based on their race or skin shade, it is positive in a legal standpoint. Even though the situation is negative, it is positive because there is substantial reason for one to win the case if they press charges because of laws in place. It is up to a person to choose whether or not they're going to be colorist under the ethical implications of goodness. Many people who only date lighter-skinned individuals say it's just a preference. Unfortunately, most of the time, that preference leads to discrimination and prejudice towards darker-toned people of color. If most people view lighter-skinned people as their ideal preference, it isn't a preference anymore. It becomes an issue when why darker-skinned individuals are being ignored and not included by the majority. One of the biggest skin lightening brands, Fair & Lovely, changed their name to Glow & Lovely. They did this to ease the negative feedback of people thinking it was wrong and not moral to advertise using the words fair and lovely together. This is a moral issue and still is because it revealed what was wrong with these products as a whole. The products are still there and the issue is that they should be gone completely so people don't think it's justified to profit on vulnerability. To talk more in detail about skin lightening and bleaching creams, they are worldwide products that can be physically and mentally damaging. People of color have used these products in several countries to make their skin lighter because of internalized ideas of what they should look like to be beautiful. These products, even though they're advertised as safe on the packaging, can contain chemicals and ingredients extremely harsh for the skin and body. Yet the skin lightening cream Fair & Lovely boasts 38 million users worldwide. The media can be extremely colorist as well. Things have progressed, but not enough to dismiss the lack of representation that has gone on for years. Most of the media heard the message about their lack of people of color, so they added people of color here and there into the work, but one thing they failed to realize is that people of color come in all different shades, not just light skin. In Bollywood, the primary media source for much of Asia, there has been an overwhelming amount of underrepresentation of darker-skinned individuals. They even go as far as to cast a lighter-skinned actor and do their makeup so it looks like they're darker. There is this common misconception in many parts of the world that lighter is better. Dark skin is just as beautiful as lighter skin, yet there are still so many that disagree. Chika Okaro reflects on when she went to a movie casting call. I felt shoved aside for those with more favorable features, light skin, light eyes, long, soft, real hair. But the more I thought about it, the more the feeling of betrayal slipped away for the more familiar feeling of, that's just the way it is. Because in my world, this phenomenon is all too familiar. These standards are unrealistic and hateful towards so many people. The United States, where slavery was a big part of its history, is also afflicted with colorism. Many states have unfortunately been known to discriminate more against darker-skinned individuals. There are several accounts of people agreeing with the claims that there is a light-skin bias in America. In a particular blog post, someone said that the West Coast was the worst place for darker individuals because it was full of colorism. Another said that there's no escape from colorism no matter where one moves. Even though these are specific encounters, they show that people have to learn to deal with colorism. Mental health is also greatly impacted by colorism. There are a multitude of people who suffer from mental illness in the United States, but discrimination and prejudice contribute to the increasing numbers. Colorism is a reason many people face self-esteem issues. 1 in 5 American adults has a mental illness. This is a large number, and what makes this worse is knowing that many of those issues could have been triggered by hate. Colorism is usually within racial groups, but white people have shown signs of colorism as well. People of all races can be colorist, and it is very evident in the United States. In the 20th century especially, when light skin tones were one of the #1 things employers look for in their employees. Living in the United States as a darker person of color is not easy when colorism is present, but can also take a toll when one's own state maintains colorism as well. Hollywood is a big part of California. Actors in Los Angeles have personally experienced colorism. They have recounted stories of how they were not seen as main characters and were often pushed off to the side just because of their skin tone. Even when there is the representation of people of color in a show, the people of color tend to be lighter, and that is because of the specific casting that Hollywood wants. Hollywood's lack of minorities with varying skin tones is finally being called out. Whether it is intentional or not, people view lighter-skinned people of color as more educated than darker-skinned individuals. This reigns so much in the workplace that California had to pass a law where employers could not make a decision based on skin tone, but solely on credentials and what the interviewee had to offer. The modeling industry is also large in Los Angeles. Just like TV show and movie actors, dark-skinned models have also felt underrepresented. It was fairly recently when women and men of color were made lead models for ads in magazines, but usually dark-skinned models are rarely seen. Even if they do add a person of color that is darker, they're almost always of the same racial group. 78% of models are white and the rest are people of color. The amount of darker-skinned models must be very low, considering the people of color percentage is already so low. Los Angeles, where many big modeling agencies are, needs to work on representing everyone, especially in a time when models are seen everywhere. Teens and young adults from Northern California have shared their stories of colorism. One young adult found that his college didn't develop the yearbook photos of darker-skinned people enough in order to make them seem lighter. This was an act of colorism. It showed those students that their skin wasn't worthy enough to be embraced and showcased in the yearbook. Another teen claimed that in high school, people would call and compare her to a gorilla. They would even go as far as to make gorilla noises as she walked down the hallway. With people constantly looking down on darker skin, the people with darker skin start to believe the hate. They then have internalized colorism for themselves, and it becomes extremely hard to unlearn that because of constant reminders that their skin isn't beautiful. History has shown that churches have struggled with colorism within their congregations. People were not allowed to enter church solely based on the shade of their skin. Luckily, times aren't as severe as this was, but it still existed and should be remembered. It is important to see how wrong that was and continue working on making things extremely inclusive for the Christian brothers and sisters of color. Colorism in American churches was extremely present after slavery. There were harsh practices that determined whether a person was light enough to enter the churches. That was how times worked, and it was normal, which is why colorism is such a big issue and needs to be addressed in the Christian community. The paper bag test was often utilized in black settings in the process of hiring people. If a person was lighter than a paper bag or the same shade as it, they would be allowed into church or get hired for the job. Those who were darker than the paper bag would be denied entrance to church or the job. The paper bag test also determined whether people got to join certain social organizations, fraternities, and sororities in the 19th to 20th centuries. In the 1960s, individuals would hold paper bag parties. It can be inferred what the conditions of entering these parties were. It was the same, you have to be lighter than a paper bag rule. People have falsely interpreted scripture where dark skin is mentioned as talking about it as if it is a sin. The truth is, dark skin was embraced and celebrated by people in the Bible. The Bible says nothing about dark skin being a sin, but rather it is humans who have created this notion due to false pretensions. Humans created colors ideals, not the Bible. Throughout American history, black skin has been deemed sinful with false theologies such as the curse of Ham, where Genesis 19, 20 through 27 was incorrectly interpreted to deem all people of African ancestry as eternally cursed and sinful. Just reading scripture without taking in its true meaning has led to the turmoil of skin tone bias and discrimination in the Christian community. The church has had its issue with colorism in the past, and sometimes it still does, but there are ways to work on making Christians and others understand the importance of avoiding colorism in the best way they can. The main goal for Christians in modern society is to avoid colorism. It is the duty of Christians to love everyone and not exhibit any bias. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You're also to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. John 13:34 through 35. Christians should be aware of their preferences and the relationships they choose to make or ignore. Christians are called to love their neighbors, and preferencing is excluding people. Christians should reach young Christians in particular to revise and evaluate our relational decisions and how we view preferences. Christians should serve others facing colorism. What is meant by this is reaching out to places that work on eliminating colorism and helping those who face it. Learning is the first step, but taking action is the second. There are many ways to take action. Following along with the Interracial Colorism Project Incorporated can also help many Christian individuals learn and educate themselves on colorism. Christians can also donate money or their time by volunteering at places associated with the topic. One principal project to donate to is melanation. Being selfless is a big factor in the Bible, and this is a great opportunity for Christians to practice that selflessness. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Philippians 2:4. The issue that needs to be tackled is reducing the number of people that are harmed from these negative ideals daily and help create awareness. The impact of colorism is very close to my personal life. When my mom was younger, she lived in India. As I have mentioned all throughout my project, India is heavily affected by colorism. Growing up in a place where colorism's roots run deep has a significant impact. As a child, my mom's skin shade was always compared to her siblings. Both of her siblings are on the fairer side, and she had more of a medium tone. She wasn't even on the darker side of the skin tone spectrum, yet people considered her too dark. Her family loved her, but it was outsiders who thought it was okay to speak on her looks. She would be walking, and people would ask her why she was so dark and tell her she needed to use products to make her skin lighter. So she did. Until she was 14 years old, she used a skin lightening cream, Fair and Lovely, to be able to feel accepted by others. She eventually learned that her skin was indeed beautiful, and she shouldn't waste her time following those colorist ideals. But it still happened, and she was so young. Colorism is real and has impacted the people I love, which is why it is so important that colorism be diminished completely and that everyone be educated on the topic. People who experience colorism truly face hurdles lighter-skinned people don't. The people in the Bible embrace darker skin, so why can't modern human beings? Sharing stories of colorism is not blaming others, it is speaking up and creating awareness so others don't have to face what they personally have. Humans are hyper-focused on appearance and fail to realize everyone comes from the same creator. Underneath it all, everyone is all the same flesh and bones. People shouldn't ignore skin tone, but rather normalize it and embrace it just as they do for lighter skin tones. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?